Our next speaker is Mr. Dilip Sawhney, President AIA and Managing Director, Rockwell Automation, India. Appointed President of Automation Industry Association in September 2014, Dilip has more than 25 years of experience in the industrial automation and healthcare technology industry. This year, he was elected to the National Council of CII. He joined Rockwell Automation in August 2008 and has since been responsible for leading Rockwell Automation's India business, developing the market, creating partnerships, and building a team that serves customers across industries. Dilip graduated with honors in electrical engineering from IIT Roorkee. Dilip, please come on to the stage.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words and the nice introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure and honor to be speaking here at the ARC Forum. I also want to say that as AIA, we are tremendously proud to be associated with the ARC Forum this year. So the topic that I'm going to be touching upon is going to be consistent yet different from what many of the preceding speakers have touched upon through the morning session and now with Mr. Raman. I'm not going to be diving into things like what's happening around the world of contemporary technologies, IoT, and all of those things. I'm not also going to be diving deep into how these things have the potential to transform the manufacturing landscape. I think enough justice has been done through the day on that. Instead, what I would be talking about are the challenges which the industry needs to wake up to, right, as manufacturing transforms around us, right? So that's a little bit of the context and what you can expect from my presentation over the coming few minutes. All right. Okay, so before I get started, I thought it'll be worthwhile for me to give just a quick, crisp introduction about Automation Industry Association. This is a congregation of people associated with the automation industry, so I expect that maybe many of you would already be exposed to who we are. AIA, or Automation Industry Association, is the apex industry body for the industrial automation fraternity in India, right? Although we are just about a decade old now, we were founded in 2004, but our membership is already 50 companies. And these are 50 companies across the board, multinational corporations. These are Indian companies, very large corporations to very small, mid-sized companies, across the length and breadth of the country. The one thing that binds us, we are all associated with the industrial automation industry, right? As either systems integrators or manufacturers, some of them are OEMs, but all of us are basically part of the ecosystem of the industrial automation fraternity, right? The technologies that our members represent, they span the full cross-section of industrial automation, right? Some of the things that we are really passionate about, right? So we've been spending a lot of time, a lot of energy and efforts around really making sure that there are skills and there's competence around industrial automation, right? As I dive deeper into my topic today, you will see that there's a critical dependence on the people side of the equation, right? And that's a core part of our agenda as Industry Association, right? That's one. Another one thing which also has been very, very important for us and one thing which we are equally passionate about is focusing on driving standardization, right? Which makes it much more easier for interoperability, for scaling up, for a variety of things. So these are a few things where a lot of work is going on inside of the association, inside our working committees, and hopefully some of that is work which has also reached you. All right. So with that little background, I thought before I dive really deep into the challenges side of the equation, let me just paint a picture about what's going on as far as the manufacturing activities in India are concerned, right? Let me just step out. I believe that when it comes to India, manufacturing is not really an option. It's more of an imperative. Several reasons why I say that. While on the demand side, it's very easy to see that it's demographics that are basically driving demand, right? rising. On the one side, there is rapid, consumerism is booming in our country. I think it's easy for all of us to see, particularly when it comes to places like Bangalore, right? And at the same time, rapid urbanization. These two sort of mega trends, maybe down a year and up with a bang the next year, but as a consistent factor, they're going to stay, and they're going to be having a strong impact on the demand side of the equation for manufacturers. But if you look at some of the other challenges, right? Now, be it on account of globalization, be on account of rapidly emerging new disruptive business models, be on account of the immense pressure on pricing, or be on account of the extreme scarcity of resources that we are beginning to experience, right? Not just minerals, all kinds of resources, right? Or be on account of an increasingly strict and vigilant regulator, regardless of which industry you're operating in, right? All of these factors working sometimes in tandem, sometimes individually, making sure that the rules of the game in manufacturing are not the same as they used to be in the past. Manufacturing is changing rapidly, the rules of the games are evolving, and it is very, very important for manufacturers to be innovating at a rate which is faster than what they've done ever in the past, right? Just to stay where you are, on the treadmill, because the speed of the treadmill is increasing, right? The one thing which really has the answer to meet all of these challenges is technology, right? Now, technology has already, always been existing. Mr. Raman was talking about 25, 30 years that industries like power generation and others have been using, technologies to run their operations. So what's new? What's really new is basically, the amalgamation or the blending of contemporary technologies which have already existed, always around us, with some of these new age contemporary technologies that are coming up, and they are throwing up new solutions for problems that are newly being encountered, right? And these are technologies that I know many of the speakers before me have spoken about, technologies such as mobility, big data, analytics, so on and so forth, right? One thing which comes out very, very clearly is that for the sake of competitiveness of the manufacturing sector of India, rapid adoption of technology is a must. So that's like my big takeaway as I move on to the rest of my presentation. So as we think about the challenges that manufacturers encounter, and as we begin to understand and analyze the role that technology has to play in terms of solving some of these problems and meeting some of these challenges, there are a couple of points that really stand out. The first one is basically technical discipline, right? When you're talking about technology, right? It's not as easy as drag and drop and just things on a shop floor or inside a manufacturing enterprise simply get transformed. No, it's a massive change management exercise, right? Where are the people who have the ability to live and exist in the manufacturing ecosystem, who are having the awareness and the ability to deal with the new technologies? India produces probably a record number of, technical degree holders, right? But both in terms of skills and in terms of the mindset that is required to lead this change, I think we are falling woefully short. So this becomes one of the major challenges that India faces as we get ready to meet this, the demands of the future of manufacturing in the country. The next one, and this one is very interesting and very different from the first factor I spoke about. This one, a quick fact for you to consider, and many of you sitting in the audience already know of it. This is the role of the SME sector, right? The SME sector, the MSME sector to be more precise, contributes to about 50%. That is more than half of the industrial output, right? That's how big that number is. Of the industrial exports from India, it's a similar number. So when you talk about, raising the bar for manufacturing across the country, you cannot talk about it without being inclusive of the needs of the SME and the MSME players. It is absolutely critical. Now, that's easier said than done, because the needs for this group, this community is vastly different. Do they need technology? I believe absolutely they do, and we'll talk a little bit about that, right? I think it is equally critical for them to be embracing technology for several of the reasons that I already cited on the previous page, right? But the solutions need to be designed that are appropriate for this sector, right? Which can be very different from large power producers or large end users or what have you, right? This is absolutely very different. Now, one phenomenon which has been seen and observed is, the SME players, while there are always exceptions that, that proverbially speaking prove the rule, but in general, they've been gun shy of making the investments, which the SME players outside in the developed world are never shy of. They have easier access to capital, they have easier access to talent, and so on and so forth. These are some of the challenges which SME players in India definitely encounter on a daily basis that the global counterparts don't have to, right? I wanted to really call your attention and really put the spotlight on these two issues because these are going to find mention in what I'm going to be sharing with you as I go further. Let's talk a little bit about the role of people, right? Now, while we've been talking about the role that technology has to play in the adoption of new contemporary technologies on the shop floor, et cetera, when it comes to products, it's all right. Machines produce products, plants produce products, but when it comes to some business critical factors, right? Factors like higher level matrices, like asset utilization, like safety, like customer satisfaction, regulatory compliance. It's not too hard to imagine that if you just leave it to machines alone, it's not going to happen. The man behind the machine has a very, very important role to play to impact each one of these few things that I've got listed out in the chart behind me, right? It is absolutely, absolutely critical, right? So as we think and as we reimagine, the new operating technologies on the shop floor, it is very, very important to make sure that these technologies are people-oriented. These technologies, being people-oriented, would actually enable the change management that organizations need to drive through their processes and their enterprises. And they will also make sure that your human capital is actually focused on dealing with higher level constraints as opposed to being caught up in the minutiae of running the day-to-day operations, right? These are the factors that you as business people need to be really worried about, right? So would you not want to make sure that your production processes allow your people to focus on these things, while technology and we as people who provide technology, shoulder the responsibility to make sure that technologies enable people to focus on these areas, not on running the minute-to-minute and day-to-day operations, right? So this was an important distinction I wanted to leave this audience with. Talk about technology and let's talk about some other factors. I think it's probably safe to assume that access to technology for people and manufacturers in India is no longer a real big concern, right? I think contemporary technologies are easily available and accessible, right? That, to my mind, that is, and people in India are also becoming more and more confident about, adopting new technologies. We've seen evidence of that all around, across industries. But when it comes to things like deploying these technologies in your respective context, right, on your shop floors, in your processes, right, things that I think are conspicuous by their absence are things like engineering standards, design standards, right? Sometimes in our need for speed, and probably sometimes, in the spirit of jugaad, right? What we end up doing is we end up compromising and overlooking, the aspects of standardization, right? And what it does is later on it comes in the way of rapidly replicating things that you may have deployed in one area of the plant to another area of the plant or to another plant altogether and so forth, right? That's a mindset and that's a thought process which I think we need to imbibe, right? And that's something which is yet another India-specific challenge that needs to be, at the top of our minds as we go further, right? And then the other thing is, as we continue to think of, technology and people and the interplay that, these two have to make a business impact, right? It is very, very important to make sure that how we deploy technology is basically done in a manner that makes the life of the operating staff, the shop floor operating staff, the operators, the maintenance folk, and so forth, right? Their lives have to become, more, what should I say, easier. I would use the word probably liberated, so they can focus on things that are more important, and they feel that technology is actually enabling them, do higher order things, right? As opposed to what they were doing in the recent past, right? So I spoke a little bit about, engineering standards, design standards, and so forth. Some of the gaps which from time to time do show up, depending upon where you're deploying which projects, some or many of these might show up, but I think, across a wide spectrum of industries and customers, we've seen things of this nature, present themselves, right? And to my mind, these are things which are indicative or symptomatic of lack of a process discipline, right? And I think that is something which is equally critical and very important for us to focus on, right? These are areas which sometimes tend to get overlooked when we are deploying a project. Sometimes they're done in the interest of being more cost efficient, but a little bit of cost saved at the early stages sometimes manifests itself in severe cost and time overruns as you're completing a project, right? So process discipline, process rigor is exceedingly important, right? As manufacturing, gets to scale up and gear up to meet its ambitions in India to be 25% of the GDP from the 14-15% it is right now, right? So what I want to do right now is I want to talk a little bit about a couple of case studies. I want to leave this audience with some thoughts about success stories from in India and across the world where people have utilized, this thinking, this thought process, and used technology and automation to actually achieve business success, right? First one is basically an Indian story. I've actually anonymized the customer names, right? This is a leading compressor manufacturer from India, right, that has gone on to become a top 5 player in the world. How they've done that? People might think it's because of native cost advantage. Well, the answer is no. Partly yes, maybe, right? But vast majority of their success is attributed to how they have assimilated technology into every aspect of their design, development, and manufacturing, right? And to the extent that their quality is obviously world-class and world standard, they are putting, lifetime warranty on some of their products. Some of the core of the compressor packages, they're so confident that they are actually carrying a lifetime warranty on that. And that's been made possible for a company that's coming out of India and now planting their flags across the world because they've imbibed technology and they've woven it in a very, very meaningful and effective manner across the people and their processes, right? Let's talk about another example. Now, this is an interesting example, a vastly different industry, a whole different part of the world. This example has been picked up from North America. There's a company that basically used to be a small family-owned business making dinner rolls, right? But these rolls were very popular, so they wanted to scale up their business. And just in a matter of a few years, they've been able to scale it up that they become a dominant force in the industry. They got 11 production lines that are all centrally monitored from, someplace in California. They're having. The reason they've been able to be successful is they picked their processes, standardized them, and then rapidly redeployed them. They had complete integration. They benchmark their lines against one another, see where there is an opportunity for them to improve their performance. They're using analytics very, very efficiently, right? And to think that, just a few years ago, they used to be a small family-owned business, and how far they've come along, is a testimony of, what appropriate thought process coupled with, technology adoption can do, right? So, I want to leave you with this thought here, the signs or the impact that skills can have on a nation. I think, a skilled nation, it's very safe to assume there are a number of studies that have been carried out by leading economists across the world, right, who've drawn a clear correlation between how skilled a nation is and how competitive a nation turns out to be, and of course, how much of wealth creation they can manage to do. From my standpoint, I think, skilling actually is basically going to be, increasing the morale of your people, right? Makes them a good, engaged workforce, which is obviously a critical advantage for you as a business. Most of all, it has a societal benefit. If manufacturing in India becomes, more competitive, I think that's going to serve a major societal benefit, because manufacturing is being looked upon as an important sector to create jobs, right? So this is exceedingly important. I want to bring it home, and I want to tie it up to the core agenda of Automation Industry Association. Skills is very, very important for us. We've been running several programs, one of which is Campus Connect, right? I would encourage you all to come find me or come find my colleague, Anup. Anup, if you want to stand up, I think people can. Anup is the Director of Automation Industry Association, right? We'll be very happy to talk to you more about this, as opportunity permits over today and tomorrow, right? And the other aspect which I spoke about is the competitiveness of the SME sectors for India, right? So I hope the time that I've taken off yours has been important and has given you some different points to ponder about. But it's been my pleasure to be part of this forum this year. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and giving AIA this opportunity. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.